Are you looking to build one of the fastest gaming PCs you can assemble right now? If so, you've come to the right place because we've picked up a 3090 Ti, the brand new Ryzen 9 7900X. Oh my goodness, 32 gigs of DDR5 and a brand new X670E XTREME motherboard that costs a small fortune. And in this video, we're going to be seeing how just all of these components stack up. Building a PC inside the incredible brand new 700 BERSERKER PC case. Oh yes, it's that kind of video. Let's do this. The NZXT H7 lineup of cases truly does provide a chassis for everyone, with the H7, H7 Flow and H7 Elite each focusing on different areas of the market. Whether it's RGB and tempered glass you're after, or full out airflow, NZXT have you covered. And to show you what they're made of, we've put together a build in each of these brand new cases. Learn about the full range at the links in the description below. Right, so the chaos of the intro aside, let's take a look and take stake at what actual components we're going to be using. And start off by focusing on all the core bits, the GPU and the CPU, the two most important parts for the performance of any gaming, editing, rendering rig you can build right now. I'm out of breath after that intro. For the GPU, we've gone for the 3090 Ti. It's the undisputed king of the GPU market right now, though that could be set to change. I mean, should be set to change really with the RTX 3090. Make sure to get subscribed to the channel because I'm sure we'll be hands-on with a 4090 at some point in the future where we'll be covering it here on YouTube and over on the website. For now though, the 3090 Ti, I mean, it'll do really, won't it? It's not a bad compromise. 24 gigs of RAM, a 4-year warranty, super high clock speeds and market-leading performance. If 4K gaming's what you're after, this thing can swallow it up. You've got NVIDIA ray tracing and DLSS supported out of the box, and this AORUS card, you might notice, is a significantly larger box than most other GPUs. Let me grab one for comparison. Take a look at this box for the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Ti. They look, James, about the same size. Oh no, the 3090 Ti, there's too many numbers. The 3090 Ti is considerably larger. If we take a look inside our GPU box, all starts to become clear as to why it's perhaps quite so big. And the answer really is not the main PCB bit of the graphics card. The individual GPU unit itself that plugs into the motherboard is fairly compact. The radiator underneath though, which is a staggering 360 millimeters in size, certainly is not. You're gonna need a large PC case for a config like this, but it will do an amazing job of keeping the 3090 Ti cool. Of course, the cooler the card runs, the higher clock speeds we can get, the better overclocking headroom. The whole thing's pretty crazy. Basically a GPU with a Gigabyte AORUS AIO attached. What's not to love? Now, to be clear, it also makes a whole load of practical sense. It's a card that runs hot is the 3090 Ti, and having a really efficient water cooler like this will also keep our noise levels down for our system, allowing for more silent-oriented operation. Another component which is going to need some significant cooling today is the Ryzen 9 7900X. It's one of AMD's top-end CPUs, only beaten out by their own more expensive 7950X. With class-leading clock speeds, fantastic performance that outdoes Core i9-12900K, and a fantastic architecture, Zen 4 really is shaping up to be exciting. You will pay more for a CPU like this due to the requirement of a new expensive motherboard and DDR5 memory, but otherwise we're very happy with it. It doesn't come with a stock cooler for obvious reasons. These chips need some serious cooling power to keep those high, near 6 GHz boost clock speeds under control. With 12 cores and 24 threads, these chips are certainly no joke, and the IHS, the integrated heat spreader, looks incredible. Like, how sick does that look as a processor? You've got the contact pins on the bottom, or should I say contact points. The pins this time around are on the motherboard, and an architecture which has widespread PCI Gen 5 and DDR5 memory support. One of the easiest ways though to check out what kind of support this architecture has is with the motherboards, and there's no better option than the AORUS X670E XTREME. Now this is AORUS's highest end motherboard and hopefully should match with our high-end AORUS graphics card, one that aims to provide basically all the features you could ever want from X670E. That is, of course, the extreme version of what is already the highest end AMD chipset. It's not cheap, but it will give you plenty by way of features. Front and center, you'll find the AM5 socket, flanked by our DDR5 memory slots, and PCIe Generation 5 M.2 and PCIe lanes. I'm actually going to have to read some of this off Gigabyte's website because there are so many specs, it's impossible to remember them all and get them right. Wait for this. You get a digital 18 plus 2 plus 2, so 22 phase VRM design. Wow, with 105 amps. That's just ridiculous. You've then got an Aorus animated display on the PCB, which I think is here under these cool line kind of covers. Taking a leaf out the MSI Godlike book there. You've then got what they call their ultra durable armor on both our RAM DIMM slots and our PCI slot, with this cool little button to actually release the PCI retention clip. That makes taking out a GPU easier, especially when they're big chunky units like the new 4090 and 4080 range that Nvidia recently announced. All built on a double layer PCB with an IO and connectivity range that can quite literally transfer with the best. Take a look at the rear panel of this board. You've got USB-C 10 gigabits per second, pretty standard but good to see. USB-C 20 gigabits per second, even better. A pair of USB 3.2s below a 10 gigabit Ethernet port. Another 2 plus 2, so 4 more USB 3.2 ports. 4 USB 2, display outputs, Wi-Fi 6E, BIOS flashback, optical audio. Gigabyte, you've just excelled yourself on a board that quite literally could win weightlifting competitions. This thing is so heavy. It's got this massive metal backplate and heaps of connectivity. Alongside PCIe Gen 5, you've got PCIe Gen 4, plenty of M.2 slots, multiple USB 3 and USB 2 headers on the front panel, Q-code displays, literally anything you want on a motherboard. I can't think of one feature on this board that's missing, other than Thunderbolt, but it's an AMD board, so it's never going to have Thunderbolt anyway. Oh, doesn't have a removable display. The MSI Z690 Godlike had one of those, but it wasn't really that useful anyway. So a display on here, it's not touchscreen, but I think I'll get over that, and you can tweak it in software. Right then, that's enough rambling on about one of the most insane and expensive motherboards we've ever featured here on the channel, and time to install the CPU. It's kind of hard to get you guys an actual angle on this, you can see, because of how many heat sinks and cooling fins there are around the CPU. We're going to lift the arm of our socket upwards, and then the socket is going to unfold from the top. This is an LGA socket type, so the same type Intel have been using for years, and allows for greater power delivery, as well as, of course, for PCIe Gen 5 and DDR5 support. This is always a bit of a delicate process because you do not want to bend the pins on the motherboard. We're going to line it up. That's looking okay. I think it's in. Pop the cover down, and then we can fasten it into place with the retention arm. It's quite stiff. You need a lot of pressure to get this in. And the top cover should then pop off nice and easily. It is a stunning processor. It looks absolutely awesome in a board like this. No complaints from me here, AMD. What we then need to do is pop in our RAM or memory, which is box fresh. I recently watched a reaction video from Zach's Tech Turf, who makes some good PC builds. And he was like, are all your components not new? No, we use a lot of the components on the channel multiple times because we, look after the environment and are very eco-friendly. No, I'm joking. We just can't afford new components all the time. But this is one, as is the motherboard and CPU today. If I can actually get into it. Here we go. Now, this is Corsair's Vengeance RGB DDR5. We've got a few of these kits in already, but what makes this one special is the low latency, 6,000 megahertz speed, and support for AMD's EXPO tech. It's kind of like AMD's version of XMP. So you can go into your BIOS and choose memory profiles with compatible kits to reduce latency and increase speed. DDR5 memory is thankfully getting cheaper, and of course Ryzen 7000 will help with that, as the volumes of memory required and volumes of memory being bought will increase, thus reducing the costs. At least that's the theory. Now, taking a quick glance, this is interesting. I did not expect this. I thought the box looked kind of black, but this kit is actually like a grey. That's really weird. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got no problem with it being grey, but I think that a black kit is a bit easier to match with things. Whether this is sort of Corsair's way of making an EXPO derivative that looks a bit different, I'm not really sure. Now then, we're going to hover the RAM over the slots. We'll be using the second and fourth, so that's this one just here and this one just here. The first and the third will be leaving today. Pull back the clips on your slots on both sides, slide your RAM into place with the Vengeance and DDR5 text facing away from the CPU, and click it into place. You might notice that these DDR5 slots feel a bit more snug than some of the DDR4 ones. The extra armor on the slots also helps with making these things feel that little bit stiffer. If we spin the motherboard round, we're then then going to go ahead and remove this heatsink in preparation for the next stage. I mean, if one thing this motherboard is surely going to guarantee is that your M.2 SSD is not going to be getting warm anytime soon. Look at the size of that heat spreader. You could cool a nuclear power station with a heat spreader like that. You could cool me in the winter. No, the summer. You could cool me in the summer with a heatsink like that. That is absolutely obscene, and I love it. We do need to remove the film on the protective M.2 heat pad as well, which allows for the transfer of heat between the M.2 drive and the metal on the motherboard. Let's just hope that the bottom side of your SSD doesn't get quite as toasty. Thankfully, the Seagate Firecuda 530 doesn't run too hot, but a bit of cooling never goes amiss. It's a 2TB drive with read and writes of 7GB a second on both, making it, by my book, the fastest mainstream consumer Gen 4 drive on the market right now. I'll link this and all the other components mentioned today down in the description below, as usual. By the looks of it then, we've got the motherboard assembly to end all motherboard assemblies now complete and ready to go. And we can move it into the next case. A component that's just as berserk as about everything else, in more ways than just its name. How do I pick this up? Very heavy. Oh my... Oh! I think it goes without saying that we're definitely going to have to unbox this thing. Now, for anyone wondering what makes this different to the HAF 700 Evo, which was quite possibly the most expensive PC case to ever exist. Well, this is cheaper. It hasn't got the glass panes at the front that looked acrylic, but they were real glass. It's also not got the LCD, which I think not many people are going to be that bothered about. It's got mesh at the front as well for slightly better airflow, and it comes in at a more affordable price point. It's very common for case manufacturers to take the same chassis or frame and reuse it because the tooling for these cases is very, very expensive. Now, that's not a criticism by any means. It still retains the USB-C, 4 USB-A ports, a great I/O, tempered glass on the sides, and an incredibly good build quality. Not to mention, of course, support as well for dual 360mm rads and beyond. I think this thing can even fit a 420 in. It's a pretty insane or berserk case, and I think it's a good alternative to the HAF 700 Evo, which certainly is going to cost you quite a bit more money. There we go, that's a little bit more manageable. Oh, it looks good. Oh, yes. Now that looks better than the original. Like, I do miss the RGB that's no longer at the front. That was very, very cool. But the design is just a bit more, I don't know how to say this. It just feels a bit more, like, modest but not modest. It feels less busy and, like, a bit more well-proportioned, if I want to use that word. Now, normally we pride ourselves on showing all the detail of a build, showing you every little screw, every little standoff, but I think today, with the size of this, that might be quite tricky. Our studio rather needs an extension. So make sure to get subscribed. Donate to our OnlyFans. Wait, what? So we can afford to pay for studio extensions. Right, let me take all the side panels off this, lay it down flat on the table. Oh! And then we can go ahead and pop in the motherboard with its built-in I/O shield, which makes things a bit easier for us. I'm just going to leave that in and, like, I guarantee someone's going to search, like, GeekaWhat OnlyFans. When I said we needed that studio extension, this is what I meant. You can't even see the entirety of the inside of the case. Now, let me give you a quick tour around. It's like doing a house tour, this thing is so bloody big. At the top here, you've got room for, there you go, now you can see. You've got room for, I think, dual 320mm rads, if I remember correctly. You have to take this piece off, though, to get the clearance. At the back here, we've then got two 120mm fans. You've got a motherboard cut out here to allow for easier installation of your CPU cooler. This is, of course, your motherboard tray with all your standoffs here, cable management grommets here and here. Down here, it looks like you could also put a radiator in here if you wanted to, so that's maybe something to consider. You got, I want to say 180mm fans. I think they're 180s, maybe 200s. At the front, large, either way, at the front of the case. In theory, we should be able to put a radiator up there, or at least you could in the old case. There was a bracket, which doesn't seem to be in this case.
Are we missing it?
Maybe, but there's no holes for it either. Not a huge issue, because I think these radiator mounts, if that is what they are, will look pretty sick anyway. Plus, we've got 360mm room at the top and the bottom. So there's lots of decisions that we can make in that regard. You've got your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 PCIe lanes, supporting, of course, up to 4 double slot expansion cards. In reality, you'll want 2 or 3 for your GPU, then maybe 1 for like a network card or a capture card or something like that. Otherwise, though, I think that's pretty much it. Then we can grab the motherboard. Of course, if you've installed your M.2 shield properly, you can use this to actually lower it into place. Really nice kind of anti-static surface there. We're going to lower it in. All the standoffs will be in the right locations on the basis that, of course, it's an ATX board. in an ATX case. It's not falling on top of them very easily though. I have had this before on motherboards with lots of shielding. So what I do want to do is remove our M.2 central heatsink to actually just check that the center standoff is all seated properly. If it is, then we're all good to carry on. Yep, that looks a-okay, and a bit of a push there puts it on the standoff that bit better and seats the whole thing more properly. We're going to add in all of those screws, and as you can see, our extra cable management grommets will indeed come in helpful because these ones are slightly inaccessible and would look a bit silly anyway if we're trying to create nice smooth cable runs. Awesome stuff. So I think next up we're going to go ahead and install the cooler. For this I'm going to move the case out of the way and get things prepped. But to give you an idea of where I'm thinking, the AIO has definitely got to go at the top of the case. That will mean that our tubes run from our Ryzen 9 processor right up to the top here. The cooler we've gone for is from Cooler Master, so the fans should all match as well. And I think I might add in another few fans to create some sort of push-pull config to allow for increased airflow. I should probably mention what the cooler we've actually gone for is. This is the Cooler Master PL360 FLUX with 3 addressable RGB sickle flow fans and an ARGB pump that also performs very well temperature-wise. It ticks a lot of boxes for us today. Plus, it also has a really easy mounting installation method for our AMD Ryzen processor, which I'll talk about in just a moment's time. First, let's take out our fans and the radiator and pop these to the side and consult our instruction manual to make sure we're not going to get any of the steps wrong. Right then, let's tackle this big bag of hardware. What we need to do is simply remove the pre-installed brackets and replace these with these AM4, AM5 specific ones. These are going to utilise the stock mounting hardware on the motherboard, the black plastic brackets you can see just above and below the socket to secure into place. So add these in, put all of our fans on. We then need to go ahead and screw the radiator into the top of the case, and then with that done, we're going to add on some thermal paste and screw the cooler into place. Nice and simple. We'll deal with the cables and wiring section a bit later. All good. So next we're going to install the GPU, but if I'm honest with you, we've had a bit of a fan-based faux pas. Now, the included non-RGB fans I was going to use at the top here that came with our graphics card are really good, but the problem is you have to plug them into this really annoying proprietary connector that wasn't going to reach. So I've popped some standard black case fans up the top anyway, and I'm going to also add our GPU radiator to a push-pull config, using the included GPU radiator fans on the underside and the RGB ones on top for a further push-pull config. As if that wasn't enough, I'll also be adding some RGB fans on the side of the case here. Yeah! These are Cooler Master's Illusion design, and the reason I've opted for these is that they have RGB on the intake and the exhaust side, meaning we can match not only the RGB, but also the fan pressures in all the right places. So let's add in all those fans to the case. Wiring this thing up is going to be a nightmare, and then we'll go ahead and pop in, of course, the graphics card itself. Now, obviously, with this being water-cooled, it's also really small. You've got no major cooling solution on the graphics card itself. It's going to go ahead and install into our top slot over here. So by the looks of things, we need to remove the second and third PCI lanes before going ahead and clicking it into place. Oh yes. We're then going to fasten it down, I think with Cooler Master's little retention method to stop it going anywhere. I'm not going to touch on the power supply too much. It's the HX1000i. It's 1000 watts. It's got a really good 80+ efficiency rating, and we're going to combine it with some nice custom sleeve power supply cable extensions from Easy DIY Fab to finish things off. So let me go ahead and pop all of those in, get all the cables and wires connected. That could be a half-an-hour job in a build like this, and I'll see you in just a second for some nice juicy benchmarks. But before that, an epic GeekaWhat montage where we see just how good this whole thing looks when it's all powered up. See you in a second, but first, roll that montage. Taking a look at just how well this system performs, we're going to test out a wide variety of titles, starting with Formula 1 2022. At the 4K Ultra High preset, we achieved just under 160 frames per second on average, 159 to be precise. 90 and 99th percentile results were strong, and as ever, we tested using the game's inbuilt benchmark mode. It's also worth quickly mentioning the monitor we'll be using today. This is an awesome 32-inch 4K panel from Gigabyte that looks incredible and even comes with a stand that allows you to mount mount it on a desk or in the more generic way. In Spiderman remastered at 4K, once again using the high settings preset, we achieved over 100 FPS this time around, 109 to be precise, and that was with a little bit of ray tracing on as well, enabling those super realistic shadows and reflections as we swing through the buildings. In Apex Legends at 4K high, we pulled in 160 on average. Strong 90 and 99th percentiles once again kept the results looking very solid. Apex is a game where you want to be over that 144 mark, so 160 was a great result. In Valorant we also tested at 4K high, and this time, no surprises, if you've watched the channel before, you'll know that 400 plus FPS is not unreasonable. 419 on average to be precise. 90 and 99th percentiles were great, and the game looked as good as Valorant could look. Finally, to wrap things up, we also tested out Fortnite. Here we used 1080p competitive settings and got 277 FPS on average. That's when you set all the settings down to low, except the render distance, which you set to far, not epic, and enable DLSS in performance mode. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to get subscribed, check out the affiliate links to all the parts mentioned down below. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.